My name is Jessica Shklar. I'm a senior consultant with mbaMission, and I will take a few minutes at the end of this presentation to talk about who mbaMission is, but let me tell you about me. I went to Harvard College for undergraduate, and then I worked in admissions for a small university out in California, a very small university, very small university that did not have a lot of broad appeal. So in order to get out there and market the school, I had to go around the country delivering presentations because no one was beating down our doors like they are at Kellogg or other schools you may be applying to. So I started traveling around and giving presentations at back-to-school nights, at summer camps, at youth group meetings, and I would present on how do you write a college application essay, and I would present on how do you clarify your values when choosing a college. I also worked with the business school applicants, and we had 4 other graduate programs that I was the admissions advisor for as well. At some point during that, I had this revelation that I should go to business school myself. I applied to 5 schools, Harvard, Stanford, Kellogg, Yale, and UCLA, and I got into all 5. And I don't tell you that to boast about having gotten into all 5. I tell you that as credential that I really know how to write good application essays. It's just an essay form that I'm very comfortable with and have been using teaching people and doing myself for a long time. I went to Harvard, back to Harvard for business school, and then decided to leave professional admissions work, went into corporate America. I worked at American Express and at JP Morgan Chase. For a while, I ended up becoming the senior vice president and quality leader at the Chase Mortgage Division. But throughout that time, I was still working on admissions on the side. I volunteered in the New York City Public Schools, helping high school seniors with their college application essays, and I helped a lot of friends through their business school applications. And so when I got laid off with the Bank One merger, I decided to switch back to admissions, and I found mbaMission, and I'm now I'm in my 7th season. I have helped hundreds and hundreds of applicants. I've spoken with thousands of applicants through presentations or free consultations, and I just really love this job. I just love helping people tell their story. I love the self-reflection that you will see Kellogg and other schools ask for, and it's just really been a great experience. So with that being said, a couple quick ground rules. There will be questions and so at the end and on the chat wall. If you have a question that's really preventing you from understanding something I'm saying, please go ahead and ask that. If it's a question that's really unique to your situation, you may find more luck posting that on the chat wall. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about today. Inside the mind of the Kellogg Admissions Office, an analysis of the Kellogg essays. How do you create standout Kellogg application essays? How do you approach all the other parts of the application, your application strategy? And then very briefly on us, and if we have time, Q&A. If not, we'll do that at the chat party afterwards. Okay? Inside the mind of the admissions office. Who are the admissions officers? So it's really easy when you're in the position you're in now, which is the applicant at the somewhat beginning of this process and looking in, to think of these admissions officers as kind of these gatekeepers, and they're standing there with a checklist and they're keeping you out, and you think of them as like always very negative, glass half empty, looking for your weaknesses, and I really want to change that. The admissions officers are generally nice people. They're people who've chosen to go into a very people-oriented field. They often attended the school that they are working for, and they're working there because they love it. They had a great experience themselves in the MBA program, or they just really like the atmosphere. Their goal is to build a diverse class. And I'm going to talk about that more on the next page, but their goal is not to have every single applicant that they admit be perfect, because that's impossible. The goal is to assemble an overall class that meets the needs of a lot of different constituents that they represent. These people are not typically HR professionals, and really important to you, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. The admissions office is not experts in your specific career or industry. They have experts they can turn to. But by making your resume or essays too career-focused, too jargon-heavy, you're basically asking the Kellogg admissions office to do more work, to take that essay or resume to the career office and say, what do you think they mean here? You don't want to do that. You don't want to get in the way of them being impressed by you. You want to sort of cut out all that jargon and just focus on your impact and in terms that your average reader, which the admissions office is, you will understand. And as I said, they're nice people. They're not expecting perfection here. Their job is to manage scarce resources, right? Last year, Kellogg got almost 5,000 applicants for just over 500 spots. They do have yield, so they're not accepting only 500 people, but they have obviously more applicants and many more qualified applicants than they can fill. So what are they looking to do? The admissions office has to satisfy a lot of different people. Instead of thinking of the admissions office as standing there as a gatekeeper with a checklist, right, on a clipboard that says, oh, 690 GMAT, you didn't break that 700, take 2 steps back. Oh, but you work at Goldman? Okay, take 3 steps forward. And you have international experience? That's another step. Like, it's not a linear check off a box kind of assessment. It's really more the admissions office is standing there and they have hundreds of people whispering in their ears. They have the professors saying, accept students who are really smart, who I can look out and understand in the class. I can see that from their eyes that they get it. People who can contribute to the classroom discussion. Other students are saying, get people I want to hang out with. Get someone who's going to captain the intramural football team. Get someone who's going to run the energy conference next year. We need students who can fill all those roles. You have the dean saying, I don't want to end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for someone lack of integrity. Get people who have really good values, who I know will represent the school well. So recruiters are saying, get people who have experience. I know they're looking to be career changers, but get them in. They get them so I can hire people in 2 years who are really strong. And the recruiters, the school wants to satisfy all these constituents. Right? What happens if a school doesn't accept students that the recruiters want to see? The next year the recruiter schedules 1 less day of interviewing there. They have fewer spots. Then students say, oh, that recruiter isn't really there that much. I'm not going to apply. And there becomes a cycle. So the admissions office is trying to satisfy all these different people. And that's why you don't have to be perfect, because you can't possibly satisfy every single one of these constituents. So you just really want to think about how can you be the strongest applicant you possibly can be and not worry about a lot of this stuff that you can't control. So what is the admissions committee looking for? Reflection. This is really important. When people ask me how are business school applications different from law school or medical school or others, we generally tell them it's about business schools want to get to know you as a person, not just you as a professional. When you graduate from law school, you're a lawyer. When you graduate from medical school, you're a doctor. When you graduate from business school, you have an MBA. You're not a something. You're not a manager. You're not a consultant. You might be any one of those, but you're not, one thing generally, which means business schools are looking for people who they can put in these very different roles and who will make good decisions, who will represent the school well. And the way they assess that is through the kind of character that you show in your applications. They look for reflection. They look for simplicity. Just answer the question in clear language to those of us who don't know your world, so that those of us who don't know your world can understand it. Just be direct. I'll give you some examples of simple and not so simple language later. And seize the moment. The schools want to see people who make the most of every opportunity. You don't have to be an Olympic athlete. You don't have to have created Facebook. There aren't very many people who have. But they want to know that within your world, you have taken advantage of or seized every opportunity that comes your way or initiated opportunities. And they know that the scope of your world may not be Olympics or may not be Facebook, but it is within the world that you own. You have had an impact. You have changed the environment for the better. What does the admissions committee not want? So there are all these myths and rumors out there that after your post-financial crisis, the admissions committee hates bankers. Well, what can you do about it? You can't change your past. Well, they hate older applicants. Again, you can't change your age. So, think about what you can control. You probably know this better than I at this point. There's a lot of anxiety in this process, and there's a lot of stuff you can worry about. But so choose to only worry about what you can actually change. You cannot change your age. What you can do is promote how your age makes you a stronger applicant. You cannot change your industry, but you can show what you contributed to your industry and how you realized it wasn't right for you or how you realized it is right for you. It's about the self-reflection. This becomes a particular issue when you think about Kellogg, because Kellogg is, as people know, known as a marketing school. So if you might be sitting there saying, well, I'm applying to Kellogg, but I'm not really in marketing, but they want marketers. So I should find some sort of marketing story in my past and promote it. What does that do? all you've done, let's say you're an operations person, and you have some really great leadership around operations, but you decide that you have to talk about marketing because it's Kellogg. All you've done is two things. You've taken a weaker story, which is your marketing story, and tried to promote it. So now a weak marketing story is being compared against other applicants' strong marketing stories. So you've just undermined that. And you've taken your strong stories, your operation stories, and not mentioned them or downgraded them. So you've taken your strengths and hidden them. You've just flip-flopped the entire process. Kellogg has excellent marketing, but it has excellent real estate and other programs too. You want to make sure that they want to build a diverse class. So let them make their decision based on who you truly are, on your strengths. And if you're applying to a school like marketing with an operations background, that actually probably works to your advantage because the school wants to accept people who have very different backgrounds so they can build that overall compelling class. So they're not seeking a type. If they were, they would post a description on the website and then save a lot of money. Right? If they said we're only looking for marketers, then they would say that. If they said don't apply if you have below a 680 GMAT, they would say that because otherwise they're spending all this time recruiting people, promoting it at their school at school fairs, they're processing your application. If they were going to just cut off the bottom of the applicant pool, or what they define as the bottom, automatically they wouldn't put in the upfront effort to actually accept it. To promote those pieces. The other thing is I talk to a lot of applicants who pretend they're the admissions office. I talked to someone yesterday, terrific applicant who did a free consultation with me. He's got strong grades, decent and improving GMAT score, but super work, great activities outside. But he kept saying to me, oh, I can't apply to that school because I went to a state college. I can't apply to that school because they only want people from elite schools. And essentially, he was acting as the admissions office. He was not even letting them make the decision. He was saying, I'm going to make the decision for them by not even applying. If you want to go to a school, and it's really important to you, and you should apply. I can't tell you that you're going to get in, but you will have a lot better chance of getting accepted if you do apply than if you don't apply. I can pretty much guarantee that if you don't apply, they're not going to come find you. So, don't psych yourself out with all these myths about what a school is looking for or not looking for. I worked with a 38-year-old woman last year who ended up, and everyone told her she's not going to get in anywhere. She spoke with 3 other consulting firms. You're not going to get in. You're not going to get in. She worked with me. She got waitlisted at 2 top 5 schools and decided not to pursue the waitlist. She got accepted with a scholarship to a top 10 school, and then she ended up going to a top 25 school because they paid her. They gave her a full scholarship and a stipend. So, there's no myths. There's no hard and fast rules here. You just want to really promote your own strengths. Let's talk about Kellogg. 36% women, 20% minorities. International, 47 countries represented across both years. Work experience 2 to 12, average age 28. Average, not floor. Okay, that's particularly true when it comes to GMAT. So often, you see their average is 715. So often I would have a call where someone would say to me, oh, I have a 700, it's below the Kellogg average, I can't apply. Well, look at this distribution. Right? Again, if they didn't want to accept anyone below a certain number, they would tell you. And average by definition means that about half the applicants or the accepted students are going to be below that score. So, think about what these terms really mean, and don't get sort of locked up in your head about them. I see a question about pros and cons of one and 2 year program. I'll address that later because I want to keep moving through the material, but that is the first question in the queue right now. All right, let's get into the Kellogg application. 2012-2013. Discuss moments or influences in your personal life that have defined who you are today. 500 words. 2, what have been your most significant leadership experiences? What challenges did you face and what impact did you have? This is your opportunity to explain how you think bravely, personally or professionally. 3, imagine yourself at your Kellogg graduation. What career will you be preparing to enter, and how have the MBA and Kellogg helped you get there? And please answer in terms of the program choice. And finally, 25 words, what one fun or interesting fact do you want your future classmates to know about you? There is a required interview. Kellogg is one of the only top 25 schools that has a required interview. Almost all the other schools have a selective interview where you apply and then they choose who they're going to interview. The exception is Tuck, where up until the application date you can also request an interview. And then Kellogg interviews everyone because its culture is so heavily driven by students and personality. So they really want to understand that. So last year, 2013-14, what is the greatest obstacle you've overcome personally or professionally? How has overcoming this obstacle prepared you to achieve success now and in the future? 2, what have been your most significant leadership experiences? This is the same question. What challenges did you face, and what impact did you have? This is your opportunity to explain how you think bravely. And then a career question, they changed slightly. What career or role are you looking to pursue and why are Kellogg and the MBA essential to achieving these goals? They still had the required interview, and they added this curveball of a video component, and I will be talking a little bit about that. And finally, we get to this year. 2 questions, 450 words each, so they've drastically reduced their word count. Resilience, perseverance, grit, call it what you will. Challenges can build character. Describe a challenging experience you've had. How were you tested? What did you learn? 2, leadership requires an ability to collaborate with and motivate others. Describe a professional experience that required you to influence people. What did this experience teach you about working with others, and how will it make you a better leader? There is a video component still, and there is a required interview still. So what have we seen over the years? There's a clear emphasis on challenges or obstacles or defining moments, which I really see as challenges or obstacles. They're moments that made you grow. Usually we don't grow from all the good things that happen, but the ones that we suffered through. This should be a really clear message to you that that Kellogg is not expecting you to be perfect, right? They're looking for times that you've struggled. And you know what? You don't even have to have overcome everything completely. You can still be struggling with certain parts of this. But they are clearly not saying we expect everyone to have had clear sailing throughout their past life. They are very explicit in their requests for self-reflection. One thing about Kellogg that you noticed from looking through 3 years of questions with me just now is that there are a lot of sub-questions. And so you really want to be sure to answer them and think about every component. They pick these questions really carefully. So think through all the different subcomponents of the questions. They ask for examples of leadership. Up until this year, the last several years, it was very explicit where they said examples plural. And you would have to fit in multiple examples in a given essay. And they really want to get to know you well. That really comes about with the video and with the required interview. Okay? So this is how Kellogg describes itself. Kellogg develops leaders who can ignite and inspire lasting growth. You'll see I bolded the pieces that are particularly relevant. Here you will learn how to build and lead strong organizations, to see around corners and think forward, to become adaptive, resilient, and bold. You will do this in a place that requires courageous thinking among colleagues who are as supportive as they are driven. The result is exceptional personal and professional growth for you and your classmates. Why do I put this up here? Every school tells you in advance what they're looking for. If you go to any website, Duke talks about being leaders of consequence. Harvard talks about a habit of leadership. Stanford talks about changing minds, changing organizations, changing people. They're telling you what they're looking for, right? It's not that there are secrets, right? There are no secrets in this process. They're very explicit. I would, for every school, take whatever it is they say. The one school is Wharton. By the way, I've never been able to figure out what Wharton stands for from its website. If anyone does, please let me know. But all the other schools have this really clear vision and mission statement on here. So what I would do is for any school, find that, print it out, put it someplace, and as you pick your essay topics, check yourself, not just against the actual questions, but do the stories that you've picked showcase these particular characteristics. When you finish writing your essays, a last check for you should be to go back and say, have I shown that I can ignite and inspire growth? Have I shown that I have the instinct to build and lead organizations. Have I shown that I have courageous thinking? They're telling you this is what they're looking for, so you should take advantage of that. The other place this is very useful is with your recommenders. I would actually give your recommenders this kind of phrasing for each school that you're applying to, and tell them that that this is what the school is looking for and how can they reflect that in their letters. It's not hugely different across schools, but it can really make the difference in helping the school see you on their campus. So let's go into the question. So how should you think about the resilience question? And again, the specific language is resilience, perseverance, grit, call it what you will. Challenges can build character. Describe a challenging experience you've had, how were you tested, and what did you learn? You can see a lot of sub-questions, the three really. Describe a challenging experience, how were you tested, and what did you learn? So that's three components. Show that you can face real obstacles and persevere, that you've developed coping strategies. Show that you can overcome the challenge, that you overcame it, and that can be ongoing. This can be a process of discovery. Don't forget or skip or gloss over the what did you learn, and don't just trivialize it. Say, I learned to be courageous. I learned to take risks. You really have to do some deep self-reflection on this, talk about how this experience changed you. If you have examples of that, evidence of that change, you can look at that. You should express that as well. Almost no topic is off limits, but you do want to be careful when you're talking about a challenging situation not to badmouth someone. And part of the self-reflection is don't place blame 100% elsewhere. In an interaction that is difficult, there is blame on both sides, whether or not it's equal. You can show that. That shows a lot of maturity to address the fact that you have some weaknesses too, and that you had some responsibility. And what you learned could very well be tied to your own responsibility for the particular challenge. This is not a work-only question. So you can talk about community activity, you can talk about family situation, but avoid anything too intimate. So use the airplane test, right? On a 3-hour flight, would I share this information with a seatmate? Depending on how intimate you get, that should be sort of a limiting step. So personal, yes; intimate, no. And if you want to post potential ideas on the chat party later, I will address them. There are very few topics that I really consider off limits. I worked with someone a few years ago who was on Stanford, and we had a really hard time brainstorming. We spent a lot of time brainstorming, and at the end of it, I said to her, I just don't feel like I know you. I don't understand what matters most to you, which was their first question. And she was very frustrated with me by then, too, and she just kind of blurted out, well, I can't tell you what matters the most to me. I said, well, why not? She said, well, I can't write about it. She'd been working with another consultant, so different firm. She said, my other consultant told me I can't. I said, well, what is it? Well, it turns out it was religion, which she thought was a taboo subject. And we talked a lot about what it meant to her and her own growth and evolution and how she had changed because of it, and it ended up being a fantastic essay. She ended up using it for HBS. She got into Stanford, and it was really powerful in terms of helping them see who she really was. But it had to be handled very delicately, and that is something that is important, and you do want to have an outside reader say, is this appropriate? But know that you have leeway on this question to answer a personal topic. So let's go back to the influence question. Leadership requires an ability to collaborate with and motivate others. Describe a professional experience that required you to influence people. What did this experience teach you about working with others, and how will it make you a better leader? Again, a multi-part question. Describe a professional experience. What did it teach you about working with others, and how will it make you a better leader? To show how will it make you a better leader, you want to talk about how it already has made you a better leader. So providing some evidence that it changed you. So this essay could address a challenge you faced in terms of getting a team on board or convincing a senior leader. So you see the word challenge. This can also be a challenge essay, right? If you have two challenging experiences, you're in luck with Kellogg, because leadership and influence can, if everybody agreed with you, there was no problem. You didn't really have to influence them. So by the question, they're probably asking about, again, some kind of obstacle or challenge. And show that the impact you had was earned by the choices that you made. Right? It didn't just come because of your title. Show that you had to fight for this kind of respect. Leadership does not have one definition. Really think about what was your contribution. Not everybody is as fiery, vocal, yelling kind of leader, nor should they be. Some are very quiet influencers. Maybe your role in leadership was meeting with everybody afterwards and after a difficult meeting and saying, for the next time, let's approach it this way, and being more of a one-on-one. Maybe it was getting up in the middle of a group. Maybe it was calling out behavior that you didn't like within a group dynamic. It can be anything. There are so many definitions that you want to think about what experience really showcases who you are. And then again, this question has 3 components, so be sure to answer them all. Question, can we write about something that happened 7 years ago, or should we stick with something more current? So I think it's a great question. In general, you want it to be within your adult lifespan, and more current can be better. But for a question like this, which talks about the influence on you, if you can point to concrete examples of influence and how it shaped you today, then I think it's a big enough story to be meaningful. If it was kind of happened 7 years ago and that was it, no big impact, nice, chip chop, you're done, and, I'm not sure it's the most powerful story. So play it by ear. I will say that if it happened a long time ago, say like 3+ years ago, one tactic and strategy for making it seem more current, obviously being ethical about the dates, but making it seem more current is to open with the impact. Start with something today, and then reflect back on the influence 7 years ago that brought you there. I'll give you an example that's much more dramatic than this. It was for a Columbia essay several years ago, which talked about defining moments specifically. And my client wanted to write about something that happened when she was 9 years old. And I said absolutely not, and she said absolutely yes. And we went back and forth, and ultimately she's going to write about what she wants to write about. And we talked about it a lot, and it turns out she had actually had a pretty traumatic experience at 9, and she could see the ramifications of it in her every decision she made since then. And so instead of opening in the essay with when I was 9, it had to do with becoming a kind person. That was the ramification, to keep this very high level. She opened with her 24th birthday party, and she had chosen to throw a party for a homeless shelter for herself and have all her friends. And she talked about looking around and seeing this setting and seeing all of her friends serving hot dogs and burgers at a homeless shelter, and how this was kind of her definition of herself was someone who was kind. Then she thought back as to why that happened. So that's a little bit of context of how, that I think is a pretty extreme example, but it's a context of how you can take something older and make it seem more current. A couple of questions here that are relevant to this slide, and then I'm going to move on. Can professional experience be a nonprofit you're heavily involved in outside your day job? Yeah, I would think it could be. What I would do is just call the admissions office and verify that, and then, if you feel like, and then when you get a yes, you can just put in the optional essay. I recognize this essay is not professional, however, the admissions office confirmed. I actually would have no hesitation about doing that. It's still a professional context, even if it's not a work story, but I always want you to check with the admissions office. And then one last one. The accounting firm I worked for was stuck in a very outdated way of marketing, and my challenge was to get them to change. Do you think talking about my partners being old school or outdated is too much placing blame on them? I know it taught me a lot about how to work with senior professionals, adapt to different personalities, and influence change in a different way. Yeah, I think it's fine as long as you're careful of your wording, right? Like if you write, the old fuddy-duddies couldn't even figure out how to send an email. What were they going to know about social media? That's not a good thing. But if you write, although they tried hard, and their kids were helping, the exposure to social media was just not on their radar screen. You just don't write about it in a blaming way. So I think it can work fine. It's just, you be careful of your language choice. Okay, I'm going to hold off on questions so I can keep getting through the material and hopefully get to more. And I haven't forgotten about the question of the 1 year versus 2 year program. I will get to that. Okay, let's talk about the video component, because that scares the daylights out of most people. As part of the application process, you must answer 2 video questions. The getting to know you question was there last year as well. The new one this year is your interest in Kellogg. You notice that there is no career essay for Kellogg. They're not asking what you want to do. I should be really explicit about this. They're not asking about your career, right? Like the 2 questions, do not try to force fit why Kellogg, and do not try to force fit what your career is, because they're not asking that. Last I checked, unless it's within a day or 2, the application itself had not gone live, so I don't know if there's a hidden question in there about your career. Harvard has one this year. It's 500 characters about your career choice. My guess is, Booth has one also, 700 characters. My guess is Kellogg will have a very short 4-line or so opportunity to say that. But here they'll ask a video of There is a question about careers. Okay, so thank you. I will look that up. Last I checked, the application had not gone live yet. So they will ask your interest in Kellogg. On the video application, using a bank of sample questions, you can practice as much as you want in advance. And for each question, you'll have 20 seconds to prepare and 1 minute to answer. But you cannot erase or re-record your answer. So practice as much as you want, but once you go live, you go live. Okay? They're not looking for perfection and polish. It can be funny if you crack yourself up. Don't do it forced. If you lose your focus, don't worry. They're not trying to see that you're a polished actress or actor. They're trying to see that you're natural in front of the camera. They're trying to get a sense of your personality. So for the video, do you get to pick the questions? No, they will give you the question. You get a bunch of sample questions, but when it goes live, it goes live. Like you are given a question and you have not anticipated it. Here are some of the questions that were asked last year. These are not a comprehensive list. What's something you've always wanted to try? If you had an extra hour every day, what could you do with it? Okay. You can read these. What word describes you best? There's no real way to anticipate. You can look at a bank of questions. You can look at all their sample questions. They will not give you a question that was in their sample, most likely. So what you want to do is really learn how to think nimbly, understand who you are, and accept that it's not going to be perfect and polished, and that's okay. Right? But the more self-reflection you've done, the more you've looked at these sample questions, the more you'll be able to pivot. Right? Like if you've been preparing what's your most treasured possession, and then they say the actual question you get is if you had an extra hour in every day, you can turn the treasured possession question into the extra hour question. I would spend time on X hobby which led to this possession, or I would, call up so-and-so who gave me this possession and thank them. So you can be prepared for it, but you can't necessarily know exactly. You won't know which one it is. How do I explain my career goals and why I want to go to Kellogg in 1 minute? The key is really preparation. You cannot just say, Kellogg is a heavy marketing school, it's an excellent marketing school with really strong academics and a really great social environment that's student-led. They know all that, right? So you want to instead really reflect. These 3 questions are not questions you will be asked anywhere. This is how I coach my clients to be sure they've done a thorough job on their school research. So these are just Jessica's questions, right? I wrote these. But if you can answer these 3 questions about any school, you will know that you did a thorough job researching whether it's a good fit for you. So how Kellogg's academic and professional offerings will help you achieve your career goals, how you will benefit from and contribute to Kellogg's non-academic offerings, and how Kellogg is a personal fit. Okay? If you can express, so this you can prepare for, if you can express each of these in 1 or 2 sentences, you can provide a brief and compelling answer. And the real key is, don't tell them what they already know, right? And this applies to all your schools, all the why this school essay. Don't tell them Kellogg offers a terrific marketing major. Tell them instead, Kellogg's marketing major is perfect for me because. Relate what they already know, relate what they're offering to you. So I'm just going to look up the questions for a second. I have a question just because before I move on to how do you prepare and plan for your essays, I want to talk about, just answer questions on these specific essays. So question number 1, would it be more impactful to discuss challenge in a social context or discuss a challenge someone had while pursuing an entrepreneurial activity? I don't know. It depends on the activity, and it depends on what you're talking about for the other one. For the other essay, entrepreneurial could possibly be in the professional, the second essay. So, it's how best you want to represent yourself. What else is appearing in your application? I would say that the entrepreneurial activity and professional activities are more likely to appear in your resume than social ones. So if you're if you feel that the social one really presents a completely different side of your personality, that's one way to look at it. They won't know about any of the entrepreneurial, the social aspects from your resume. So that's one possibility. But if you feel like you're just not going to get to talk about the entrepreneurial one elsewhere, then you choose that one there. So I think it really just depends how you overall present yourself overall, where what your recommenders are saying, and which was the most meaningful experience. I want to address the very first question that came in, pros and cons of the 1-year program versus the 2-year. If they're applying to the 1 year, there are particular things to stress. I think the real difference is the summer internship, right, and the more relaxed pace of learning. But the key is the summer internship. In a 2-year program, you have the luxury of moving more slowly, of exploring different options, of doing a summer internship to test things out. And I would say that's for the 1-year program, you need to really be able to explain why, without that internship and without that summer switch, you'll be able to make the career change you want. Or often people who do the 1 year are not making a career change, and they're going because they just want to focus on getting the information, learning what they can, and going back to their old jobs. It's kind of like the Columbia Jan term program. So I would think about it that way. In the extracurricular section, they're asking for a number of hours a week per year. Ideally, what should be about the number of hours that a candidate can realistically showcase. Be honest, that you don't have to gameplay here. If you only spend an hour a week at it, but you do it every single year and you've had an impact, it's not about numbers of time served. It's about the impact that you've had. That's fine. 50 hours, 1 hour a week. I've certainly had people get in where one of their activities is 1 hour a week. Now, if you are only listing one activity and that's the only thing you do, that probably doesn't look as good, unless you've been able to have huge impact in 1 hour. But I wouldn't boost up the hours. You have to list them. They're going to be able to sense where you've padded around the edges. So, you could extrapolate a little bit. You can certainly, think broadly about how you've been involved. Let's say it's on a board. It's not only the 2 hours you spend at the board meeting. It's also any emails or conversations you have. You can add that in. But the hours kind of have to add up, right? They're not going to think it's realistic if you're spending 50 hours a week outside work on 2 different activities and you're pulling a 60-hour a week job. They're just not going to think that's real. So be honest, but sell yourself. Okay. Okay, there's a long question. I want to keep getting through the material, so I'm going to typical answers for why a particular school is about personal fit. There are no, I want to really try to get away from this mindset that there's some more magic formula or secret tip. It's what is it a best fit for you? What's the best fit for me could be totally different from what's the best fit for you, from what's the best fit for anybody else on this call. You have to really think, why is the school a good fit for you? Do you like the size of the school? Do you like the location? Do you like this curriculum structure? I will do a little promotion that we have a lot of free presentations through mbaMission, and we have one on school selection that goes through 9 different factors that help you determine if a school is a fit. So I have an hour-and-a-half presentation that will answer that question more, but again, there's no typical answer. You want to understand what the school offers and how that's relevant to you. Right? So think about what do you like about being in a student-driven community? Was that like your college and that's what you want because you thrived there? Or maybe it wasn't at all like your college, you had a very commuter school and so you want the opportunity of being in a community. So those are 2 completely different but very valid answers. Okay? There's a question here on very specific about applications, so I'm going to hold off on that and keep going through the material, but if I can get to that I will, and if I can't you'll post it to the chat board and I'll get to it there. Okay. So let's go through how to create compelling standout essays. One thing you want to think about is showing what I call color versus black and white. Okay? Think about it as on the application itself, you'll see drop-down boxes. Right? What is your citizenship? What is your ethnicity? What industry do you work for? List your activities at how many hours. Those are the what, right? That's the black and white. That's just a fact. What they don't see is the how, the color. Okay? So one way to think about this is black and white versus color. I actually like to think about it as the what is your resume, and then the why, how, who this person was, that's all in the essay. So here's an example, right? Black and white is Chinese citizenship. I am Chinese. The color is I grew up in a rural village. I'm the only one to go to college from my village, and very few people have ever left at all. The black and white is I led a fundraiser. The color is the event hadn't been successful, so I thought about why. And then I negotiated and convinced a board to release funds. We targeted a new demographic, and then we're really successful. This is all the why. And so that's what you want to think about in terms of presenting these essays is the color. Boy, I see lots of questions coming in. I'm going to keep going so I can get through the presentation, and then I'll go back to the questions, okay? So hold off, but I'll get there. I'm going to start talking a little faster. All right, so what we advise is do brainstorming. This is all steps you should take before you pick your topics. The next few slides are walking you through a very structured step-by-step process for brainstorming. First thing, explore everything. This is a fictional applicant. First thing they did was write down all the roles that they play in life. They're a project manager at work. They also are on the health committee at work. They lead the health committee. They're on a nonprofit theater board, and he's got a very close relationship with his grandmother. So these are just the very step one is just writing down all these possible roles. Then take one of those roles, like project manager, and say, what did I do in that role? Oh, one thing I did was manage 7 consultants at a failing company. Then say, okay, what are some questions I could ask about that? How did this happen? Who challenged me the most? Who was the biggest obstacle? Who was the most successful? How did I manage to do this? Like, just these questions are just brainstorms. They're not, the only questions to answer. Then go back into it again. What was the second activity you did as project manager? What was the third? Ask the questions. And then do it for health committee. You're starting to get a sense this is a lot of work, but what you're doing here is creating an inventory of experiences. From that inventory, you'll pick the best topics that represent you. So here you then have this inventory. Okay, so here as a project manager, what did I do specifically? It wasn't just manage 7 employees, but now more specifically, what did I do? I lobbied a client, I managed a high performer's ego, and I completed a project ahead of schedule. On a health committee, what did I do? I overcame skepticism and I developed a fitness program, conducted a wellness retreat. Theater board, grandson. I have work stories, work community stories, personal stories. I've developed an inventory. Again, I have not even thought about what to pick for my essays. I just now have an inventory of ideas that will stand me across all different schools that I'm applying to. So then you want to think about, what does the admissions committee already know about you? And this is from your resume, right? These are all bullet points that could be on your resume. Completed the only project ahead of schedule, developed a fitness program with no budget, I grew ticket holders, I led a fundraiser. These are all the facts, the what's that I talked about, the black and white. These will be on your resume. These might be bullet points on your resume or on the application itself. So then what do I want the admissions committee to know? Well, how did I do all this? I had strong persuasion skills. I had compassion. I was committed to self-improvement. I was willing to take risks. So now you're starting to see themes. Am I going too fast? I'm actually going to backtrack. Go over this again because I think I'm talking a little too fast. I just want to make sure you get this. First step, list all your roles. Second step, ask yourself, what did you do in each of those roles? And list a ton of questions for each. Just keep drilling in. How did I do this? What did I do? What were the details of this experience? Organize those into a logical list of experiences based on these specific roles that you played. Then ask yourself, from the resume and the application and the recommendations, what does the admissions committee already know? And then say, well, what else do I want them to know? What drove my success here? What can I tell them in an essay that they won't see in the resume? Here are the skills. And then, how can I demonstrate these characteristics? So I have strong persuasion skills. Oh, what are the examples that show that? I want you to go to our blog, and mbaMission/blog, and look up the blog post called Details Make a Story Come Alive. 6 of you could write, I have strong persuasion skills and show a lot of compassion. It's not compelling for any of you. You'll all sound alike. But if each of you talks about the experiences you've had that show that compassion, show those persuasion skills, your 6 essays will sound completely different. You want always, the name of the game in admissions is differentiation. So you want to differentiate yourself across each, from everybody else who's applying. And the way to do that is because the details of your story and the reflection that you show is what really will make your story stand out. Okay? Is there a common theme? So now you're starting to see these themes. Okay? I understand others' needs and I fight for their behalf. And I give examples from work, I have examples from the health program, I have examples from the grandmother. Now you're starting to get at these potential essays. Okay? But it's a long process of building an inventory, figuring out what they already know, and then figuring out what else you want to tell them and what are the themes that shows and what's evidence of those themes. Okay? You can talk about one experience in these questions or you can talk about many. Show how or why you did, not what. This is so important. Your resume and the application are going to show what you did, but you want to show how or why. Tell a story, the beginning, middle, and end. You don't have to beat them over the head with the theme. The officers are intelligent. They know what you're trying to get at. So what do you not want to do? Don't tell. I am proud that I achieved. Just show what you achieved. They'll know you were proud of it. Maybe in the reflection you could say that, but don't start out that way. Don't brag. Okay? I excel at, I am a really strong at. Show them that. Show them you're strong. I always cut the word successfully from my clients' resumes and essays. Successfully led fundraiser. Well, if it's successful, there's a metric that proves the success. And if there isn't a metric, then it wasn't successful. So don't tell me it was successful. Show it to me by giving me the metric of the number of people or the amount that you brought in. Don't pander. If the question doesn't ask for why Kellogg, don't showcase it. And don't lie. Here's a quote from the Director of Admissions at HBS. She said, I look at these applications, and these people do these billion-dollar deals, and they've grown up to somewhere else. And they don't realize that the goal of this application is simply tell your story. Okay? Just tell your story. That's what's important. Who are you? Okay. All right. Some general writing guidelines, and then I'm going to really focus on your questions very soon. So, present a clear beginning, middle, and end with room for reflection. Tell a story. Anecdotal openings are great. Catch their attention. Incorporate reflection and sincerity and show your thoughtfulness. Not being perfect is okay. I started out saying that. You don't have to be perfect. You do have to be self-reflective. You do have to learn from your mistakes. And if you talk about something that you overcame, and you can triumph, but don't make this a triumph essay. If they ask for a challenge, resilience, grit, show the struggle. That's what they're asking for. Okay, so don't just rush past the grit or the struggle to get to the end and make the essay about how great you are, because that's not what they're asking. They're asking, how did you get through this experience? Okay. You want to use a first-person perspective. You want to be sincere and earnest. And show, don't tell. These are all blog posts you can grab from our website, too. Let me talk about simplicity. Or actually, it was about bragging first. During my first 3 years at Goldman Sachs, I worked harder than other analysts. I quickly proved my analytical skills and dedication, so I was asked to mentor junior analysts and was then placed on some of the biggest projects in the company's history. I helped close the $500 billion purchase of mbaMission by Mission Inc. and led 3 analysts on the $600 billion purchase of Manhattan Inc. by GMAT Inc. I found myself getting the respect and attention of analysts, associates, even managing directors. I'd worked on international deals which carried cachet internationally. It was gratifying when my mentor, our managing director, Steve Smith, promoted me to an associate 1 year ahead of schedule, validating my tireless efforts and leadership skills. Blah, blah, blah. This guy's all full of himself. I usually take more feedback on this from the crowd, but I want to get to your questions. So I'm just going to tell you what I usually hear is, I don't want this person in my business school class. It's all tell. It's all self-promotion and bragging. This is another way to tell the same story. On my first day at Goldman, my managing director, Steve Smith, informed me, I don't have an open door policy, I have a no door policy. So I would frequently walk into his office, often at 3 or 4 a.m. with questions, only to be encouraged to ask more. After 6 months, I barely visited Steve, but soon found junior analysts at my door saying, Steve said you were the right person to ask. Then Steve personally requested I join the deal team on the $500 billion purchase of mba by Mission, and asked that I lead a team of 3 analysts on the purchase of Manhattan Inc. by GMAT Inc. After a grueling 6 months of meetings with the CFO in Argentina and the CFO in Mexico, both deals closed on the same day, and Steve championed my early promotion. Do you see the difference? He's not saying I worked hard. He's saying, you know, he was there at 3 or 4, but he's not beating you over the head with I worked really, really hard. Okay? Simplicity. This is actually an adapted but pretty much direct quote from someone. I was a client's very, very first draft. I was brimming with excitement. After years of hard, almost unrelenting work and effort, I was finally about to achieve the pinnacle of my career, a presentation in front of our CEO, an impressive man with an unrivaled pedigree, and someone for whom I held a tremendous amount of esteem. I could barely contain my excitement as I started to present, my palms sweating and my heart racing, and then, to my absolute horror, there on page 1, a typo in the CEO's name. It was the most horrifying, embarrassing moment of what heretofore had been a glowing career. Do you see how that's overkill? It's just too much, and you don't have word count for that. Here it is. It's simple. There it was in bold type on slide 1. Presentation to CEO, Peter Monroe. I had prepared for months, and yet at perhaps the biggest moment of my career, I made what can only be described as a rookie mistake. Our CEO's last name is Monroe. Do you see how much more simple that is? It's still compelling, but you're not like overwhelmed by all these adjectives and all this drama, and it's almost more devastating in just to have it be so simple. Okay? Here's some more things to watch out for. I said at the beginning that the admissions officers won't know your industry that well, so watch out for jargon. I rationalized the internal application portfolio. I led the basic design concepts for digital hardware design, such as DC loading analysis, AC. It's not a professional resume. It's a business resume. Talk about the impact. Overwrought or flowery language, as I gazed at the New York skyline, which represents the hopes and dreams of so many who'd come before, I was filled with inspiration that I too would one day reach the pinnacle of the financial industry. Just be simple. It's too much. Okay? I see this one a lot, using more words. I was engaged in the pursuit of passing my CFA exam. I was studying for the CFA exam. I passed part 1. Right? My goal entails providing counsel to key players in the technology space. Write like you talk. Okay, consultants don't write like you talk. Lawyers don't write like you talk. Everyone else write simply like you talk. Okay. Okay. Don't recycle. Don't repeat information from elsewhere. Don't tell all. Be judicious. And don't write more than you need to write. Okay. Couple slides on application strategy. Okay. This is the stuff outside the essays. Okay. Resume. Don't overstuff. A resume is representative. It is not everything you've ever accomplished. Less is more. They will scan it. You want it to be very readable. Encourage white space. Don't use tiny little type. 10-point is the smallest you want to go. The admissions officers will thank you. Okay. Describe clear actions and results. If you have really spectacular experience like in entrepreneurship, have a separate section on it. Don't bury that. Really use personal and community activities. Don't just say board member X. Like talk about what you did. The same rule applies. Show actions and results. On the short answers on the application, don't ignore that. It's very easy to cut and paste from your resume, and if you get tight on space, a lot of applicants will do that. But if you can use that space to complement or supplement your application, if you had to cut something from your resume, put it in under the activities on your application if it didn't fit on the resume. If you think strategically and plan in advance, you can make every component of your application work for you. Recommendations, meet with them, educate them. Encourage anecdotal responses. Remember I said that blog post details make the story come alive? Same thing here. Steve is awesome. They're not going to accept you on that. But Steve led and initiated a review of our system which changed the way we do work. That they're going to be interested in. And prepare your recommenders. Interview, as I said, everybody interviews. So we'll sort of deal with that a little bit down the road. It's kind of the same approach as you want to just be very detail-oriented and select in the stories that you tell, but mostly be concerned about letting your personality come through. Be real. All right, I'm going to land. We are mbaMission. We're a consulting firm. We are the only firm out there recommended by Manhattan GMAT and by Kaplan. We're the only firm of full-time consultants. We're not squeezing our clients in around our full-time jobs. This is our job. We're at our desks day in and day out, sharing ideas, asking each other questions, bouncing ideas off each other, working with our clients, and we just give unlimited support, start to finish. I'm going to land. This is our boot camp, our most cost-effective, but I am going to land on this page, because this gives you some good information to read while I'm answering your questions. We have our blog, our free personal statement guide. That's a 30-page article on how to write the career essay. Please download it. Consultations. And here are a couple more presentations we have coming up this week, 2 online and 1 in Chicago. Okay, so I am now going to go back, scroll up, and see what questions I missed. And again, if I don't get to them all, I'm going to cover them in the, I'll come by tonight to the chat party. And once again, as I'm scrolling, just a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be posted to the Beat the GMAT YouTube channel in about a week. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out where the questions are. Okay, on the application itself, I have a main undergraduate school but took enrichment courses outside the school community colleges. Would I be able to factor those grades into my overall GPA calculation? The sites don't explicitly state how GPA should be calculated or whether you should just pick the GPA from the main institution. That's really a specific question that I'd probably call the admissions office about, but I would say if you do want to calculate it in, then I would just put in the optional essay, please note GPA is calculated including the supplemental courses I took at community college. It's not a lot of trick questions in here. As long as you explain your reasoning, the schools will be fine. So if that's what you want to do, I would just tell them. but you could ask. If there isn't a big difference, then I would probably leave them separate. But if that's going to really pull up your GPA, then yeah, I can see the temptation for wanting to do that. Just tell them that's what you did. Okay? I am curious as to whether to discuss challenging upbringing in a low-income neighborhood versus a challenge faced while pursuing a nonprofit startup and impacting lives in a third world country. You know, two very interesting experiences, and they both potentially are quite strong. I would say the first one risks being, you know, a very long ago. So I would really want to make sure that you have a lot of evidence as to how it is affecting you today and how you overcame that, and not just, you know, it was a challenging environment, but these are the obstacles you specifically face, and maybe pick, you know, getting to college or coming to the U.S. or whatever it is. And for the nonprofit, if it really had an impact, you get away from the long-time one. You know, it might even be possible to merge them. You might be able to talk about the challenge in the third world country, but talk about how personally you were attracted to this organization because you had grown up in a, you know, very impoverished environment yourself. And so you understood what people in emerging markets were like. Or talk about how you called upon your own experience. You can, you know, there may be a way to merge those two. Okay. Can you do the MMM program with a one-year MBA? I don't think so, but I don't want to answer that. Go double check on Kellogg with that. Okay. Can personal fit because it's close to home and fiance? Yes, but I wouldn't make that the only reason. I would make that one ancillary one. It is good because schools want to know that the yield will be high. So if you can convince them that because of personal reasons you're staying, you know, you want to be in Chicago, that it works to your favor. But they don't want to think you're going to a business school simply because it's near your fiance. So find other reasons, and then, you know, talk about sort of. I would mention and say, I'm interested in my fiance being part of the partners program. You know, my ties to Chicago run deep. I would put it that way, kind of in a more of a context. I wouldn't just list it as the only reason. Okay. What unique qualities is Kellogg looking for? So there was a slide earlier where I quoted it. Again, no top secret from me, but it's just quoted from the website where it talked about what they're looking for. It's bold, courageous leaders looking to make an impact. You know, I don't want to leave this page because there are a lot of other questions, but they're looking for very student-driven, very personable. You can tell that they're looking for a lot of honest self-reflection, ability to overcome challenges, ability to admit mistakes or difficulties, people who get along with a lot of others. But look at the website and you'll see that, and then look back at the questions. When this recording goes up, you'll see, or on our website, you can track back through multiple years of questions, and you'll see the kinds of questions they've been asking, and that's a really good way. There, you know, again, there are no secrets. The school tells you in the kinds of questions it asks and what it puts on the front page of its admissions website, what it's looking for. Do you think Kellogg is also following the footsteps of schools such as Columbia, NYU, Tuck, and Yale regarding high GMAT score preference over other dimensions of application? I would argue about Columbia, NYU, Tuck, and Yale. I think sure, high GMAT score is always a nice thing to have, and it gives them a little more leeway in other directions. But I don't know that I've seen the trend go up dramatically. I've certainly seen people, especially with Columbia's early decision, get in with relatively low GMAT scores. I had a client recently get into Columbia with a sub 600 GMAT score. Obviously, it was a rare case, but you know, it happens. So I would say look back at the historical trend, but you can see from the breakdown I put on an earlier slide that I think it was 60% of their clients, of their students have above a 700 or above a 680. I have to go back to 690, I think. Go back and check that. But the facts are there, so it doesn't really matter if it's a trend either. You're applying this year, so you know, you want to be roughly in their middle 80%. Okay. In the extracurricular section, they have a maximum of 6 activities. Should we try to list 6, even if some are not that important or impressive? You go into the gym. You know, I've seen people do that, and I think it's fine. I would say if it adds a new dimension, right? Like if you go to the gym and you haven't talked about sort of physical activity or exercise or anything, or sort of that kind of involvement anywhere else, then sure, I would put it on. I wouldn't make it the first one. I would really hope that it's not higher than number 4. But yeah, I had someone one year who listed like 3 big ones, and then cooking, working out, and like bicycling or something. So jogging. Like it was 3 pretty weak ones, but you know, it's fine. They're giving you the leeway if you have them, but they're not expecting you to fill them out. every single one. Okay. I'm sorry, Sunny, at this point I don't know which the previous slide was, but this presentation will be recorded so you can go back and look at it again. And if you want to type at the bottom, like tell me when I get down there which slide, I will help you. I'll try to find that and put that up for you. How much context or background should we give in the essay? For example, should I mention the college name without saying in my second year of college? You know, each essay needs to stand on its own. You can't read the essay and assume that they have your resume right next to them or that they read the previous essay. So I think, you know, in my second year at Williams, if it's a well-known school, if it's not just put the name college, in my second year at, you know, Podunk College, they'll understand what it is. So I don't see any reason not to be specific, unless for some reason your college has like a 6-name, you know, no acronym, and it takes 6 lines to say it, and you know, then okay, you might not have the word count, 6-word name. But you know, I would say you want to provide the context that someone reading the application, someone reading the essay without your resume would kind of get it. Okay. If I don't mention the extracurriculars on the resume and only in the application, how is the application packet read? So every application reader is going to read, every admissions reader is going to read the application differently. Some will start with the application, some will start with the resume. I would try really hard to avoid leaving extracurriculars off your resume altogether, particularly at a school like Kellogg where the interviews are done by students or alumni. And that's because even when you interview with the admissions office, all they will have is your resume. Right? Kellogg is a blind interview, so when you walk in, they will not have read your application. They will know nothing else about you. The only things they have is on your resume. So if you want them to ask you questions about it, if there was the big parts of your life, you want them on there because for one component for the interview, that's the only document they're going to see. Okay, so make sure that's on there. Anything important is on there. What should the average word count be on a good essay? What should the ideal font size and presentation format be for a good essay? So the average word count should be what they ask for. If they say 500 words, you want it to be around 500 words. A lot shorter, and it'll stand out negatively. You can go over, but I would be respectful. I wouldn't really go much more than 5% over, and I probably wouldn't even do that on both essays. So they'll tell you. Font, you know, make it readable. So 10 points, I wouldn't go smaller than that. And presentation, you know, if they don't specify, like Duke says, double-spaced, you know, double or single space is fine. You print it out and read it. Does it look clear and clean to you? No one has ever been rejected because they used an 11-point font instead of a 12-point font. Okay, these level of details are very important for you to think about in terms of overall presentation, but they're not make or break decisions from the school's perspective. And again, there's no magic. There's no right answer. If your biggest extracurricular activity was club president where you made a huge impact, is it a bad idea to waste space repeating it in the form portion of the application and your resume and in the essays? So no, because as I said, the resume stands on its own. And if the application itself asks for your biggest activity, you sort of have to mention it. But I might use different descriptions as to what you did. So let's say as club president, you had a really big impact in a couple of different areas. Maybe mention one in the application and one in the resume. And in the essay, you want to drill into how you did that. So it goes in more depth. So it's not a problem at all. And in fact, if it's you wouldn't leave your job off, right? You would put your job on because it's supposed to be in both places. So an activity that's that big, I would put in both places. The smaller ones I may not, especially if you're tight on space. But use them differently, okay? Kellogg is big on teamwork. For most part of my career, I've had to work in teams in which I was a solo analyst reporting to senior stakeholders. How do I showcase teamwork? If teamwork is not my strongest quality, does it reduce my chances at Kellogg? Yeah, I mean, a school is looking for fit, and if they're looking for people who really work in teams very well, then that is going to be something they look for. But you could actually use that to your advantage if you worked on a team in like a recent project and you really loved it. You can say, one reason I want to switch to go to Kellogg is because I realized with this recent experience that my job has been too isolating and I haven't had to work on teams. I loved it, I did really well, but it was a small experience, and I'm particularly looking to expand that part of myself. So I wouldn't say it's not my strongest thing, I'm not very good at it. I would say I'm good at it, but I haven't had as much exposure, and that's why Kellogg is such a good fit. So that's an answer to the earlier question of what characteristics make a school a good fit. In this case, you know, that's a really good reason why Kellogg's a good fit, because you want to enhance that part of your background. We're running over, guys. I think you're still here, so I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer. This PowerPoint be available? Yes, it'll be recorded. For the resume, Do I need to list all the way jobs back to when I graduated from college? Yeah, they kind of want to see everything, or there will be job gaps, but if you've been out a really long time and the older jobs are just a long time ago and don't have much impact, you don't need to list bullet points under them with accomplishments. You can just say sort of additional experience, or list them just one after the other. They don't need to take up space. If it's that far back, I may start to question whether your age range is reasonable for a school like Kellogg, but it's certainly a possibility. But you don't want to create the impression of job gaps when there weren't any, which is why you list them. How to write about an obstacle or challenge related to a major health problem one faced once and make it look less whiny and dramatic. Well, don't whine. I mean, I don't mean to be flip there, but I wrote one of my college applications about my business school. I wrote all my business school applications about a very traumatic health issue. And I wrote about how it changed me and how it made me stronger and how it made me appreciate my family and my friends and what it was like learning to walk all over again and learning to speak again. And it showed a lot of challenge. And you don't talk, and I would talk about being depressed sometimes, but I think if you show resilience and coming through it, and it's not a question of not being traumatic. It can be traumatic, but you're not sitting there and bemoaning it and saying, I wish it had never happened. You're saying, it happened and I learned from it and I grew from it. And the emphasis would be on the self-reflection and coming through it. And again, you don't have to have had a great day every single day, right? You have to have made it through and it made you stronger. So I think the emphasis is on what you learned and how you grew. Can I talk about not being given a full-time program from an analyst program as my answer to the perseverance question? I don't want the admissions people to think I wasn't competent. How would I phrase it? So it's a great question. I think it depends a lot on what's happened since. If you didn't get given a full-time offer and your career has never really recovered and you're still in part-time jobs, then yeah, I would probably avoid that. But if you can say, but I learned from this why I wasn't, and I asked and they told me that it was X, Y, Z, and I made an effort to work on those, and since then, in the last 3 years, my career has thrived, then I think it's just a growth opportunity and you can really show how you gained from it. So I think it can be a great story, but it really depends on what's happened since. Some positions in community service are a bit recent, 7 or 8 months old, but they are good leadership positions. Is that a problem? Nope, not a problem. Especially if you have a couple of them. Again, it's really about the impact, right? It's about the impact you've had, not how long you've been in it. I hope there are some that are longer or one that's longer, but as long as you've had a real impact, then having it be recent isn't an issue. Besides, that falls into that category of what you can't change it, right? Right? You can't go back and create change time, so don't worry about it. Make everything else really strong and showcase the impact, and just don't think about it again because you can't do anything about it. In which part of the application do we state the reasons for a relatively less work experience? If you have to, it would be in the optional essay, which I didn't post. That's a pretty standard part of every question that says, is there anything else you want to tell us? It'd be very straightforward. I usually see that for job gaps, no rec from a supervisor, a low GPA. Lower work experience, I don't know that I would write an optional essay because what you want them to do is highlight the quality and understand the quality of your work. So I wouldn't really want to say, I'm applying after only working for 1 year because I really don't like my job and I want to move on. Like to be in that position, you would want to have been doing well enough that you have the odds of getting in after that short time, and that means you've got better impact on what you've done and better work. So I probably wouldn't touch that one. I might ask my recommender to address it, right? So the applicant's been in the job less time than others I've advised, and yet nonetheless is fully ready and has reached the level of peers far older. And I would probably ask them to address it if it had to be addressed at all. My GPA out of 10 from IT, when I converted proportionally to a 4-point scale, it does not quite match up to the averages. Should I be worried? No, an average is a midpoint, right? Half the class is going to be below an average. And the schools understand the conversion. So, and again, you can't do anything about it. So, you can't worry about it. Just make sure you got a good GMAT score, right? So, there's not much you can do, but the schools understand that all schools grade differently. I have a 3.2 out of 4.0 in my master's, and I have a 3.7 in my undergrad. Do I need to justify why my GPA was low in my master's? No, I wouldn't. The schools really compare applicants on the basis of an undergraduate GPA, and the master's GPA kind of just can be a nice to have in terms of your career direction or things, but that doesn't factor into their averages. So unless there was a compelling reason, right? If there's a story you want to tell, like there was a big illness or you were in a field that you realized wasn't right, if there's a story behind it, then sure. But at a 3.2, which isn't that low, I wouldn't really worry about it. If it is seen as negative to join my father's practice after completion of chartered, is it seen as negative to join my father's practice after completion of chartered accountancy? No. Again, it depends what the impact is of what you've done, right? And it might also tell them that you have a job waiting for you after graduation, so if they like that, employment numbers. So if you joined it because you couldn't get an offer anywhere else and all you've done is like work 10 hours a week and you haven't really made much of an impact, that's different. But if you've come in and you've helped modernize the office and you've brought in new technology and you've managed clients at a young age, then actually you've got a great story there. So it's all about what you've done. How good would a failed startup activity in finance look if my current goals do not adhere to finance? It can be a great story, right? You could use it to say that you clarified your goals. You can use it to say that you realize that you do love entrepreneurship even though it failed. You can use it to talk about lessons that you learned. Again, it's all about, you probably sense a theme now. It's always about the context, right, and the impact. But you can use it in a lot of different ways. So I actually thought you were going to say, how bad does a failed startup in finance look if I do want to go into finance? And I wasn't sure how to answer that. But if you don't, I think it can be used a number of very good ways. As an international student, I tend to listen that students with even a score of GMAT 550 get into some of the top schools in the U.S. if they are domestic students, but it is not the case for international, is it? Not a lot of people with 550 are getting into the top schools. There were 5% of the Kellogg class that had less than a 640. Not a lot of them were below 600, and that's only 5%. So I think that with international students, the question becomes your English skills largely. And so at a 550 for a top school, they may be concerned about that. They would look at the TOEFL. But I think you're thinking about it a little bit falsely, because I don't think that 550 at the top schools is all that common anyway, as the statistics are bearing out. Is the MMM more competitive than the regular MBA? I think not. I think it's around the same, but a little bit less competitive. That's been my experience. Should we talk about long-term goals in our application? If it asks for it explicitly. That could be a very good answer for the why Kellogg in your video question. If I had better leadership experience in extracurriculars, does it make sense to focus more on that than a professional one? Yeah, again, I would verify with the school, with the admissions office, that professional can apply to extracurricular, but in those kinds of situations, I've almost always seen schools say yes. And if your leadership is better there, then yes. I would, though, make sure that your recommendations are professional, or one of your essays is, or if both of them are not, then I would make sure your resume has a really strong professional section and that both your recommendations are professionally based, because you don't want them to sort of think that your career isn't successful, and that's why you're spending all this time on the non-career pieces. All else equal, if you're coming from a traditional background, is round 2 a really bad idea? The general rule seems to be don't apply too early before your application is ready, but I'm trying to decide if it's worth rushing the application process for 924 instead of planning for a more thorough process in round 2. So round 1 being better is probably the single most pervasive myth that our company wishes we could blow up. There is really no difference. More people apply in round 2. That's probably shifted a little bit, but the acceptance rates are roughly the same. I've even heard the director at Harvard say, apply when you're ready, apply when you have the best application, but don't apply in round 3. I added that part. There's very little benefit. The only exceptions I would say is if you are in an extremely overrepresented demographic, then you might want to stand out. Like the head of admissions at Stanford tells finance applicants, he goes to the PE firms and says, we want our finance applicants in round 1. I've known finance applicants to get into these schools in round 2, but fundamentally there's not really a difference. So especially if, it's all a question of trade-offs, right? Like if there is a difference in round 1, you might lose any benefit of round 1 if your application isn't as strong. Right? I just talked to someone 2 days ago who is all ready for round 1, except his GMAT isn't quite where he thinks it can be. So we were talking about, is round 1 with a lower GMAT worse or better than round 2 with a higher GMAT? And he's going to go with round 2 because he knows he can get a better GMAT and he won't feel like he did everything he could. Okay? I don't know why that is so pervasive. Guys, I have about 4 more minutes to answer questions. Chances of getting in round 1 more than round 2, they're about even. Okay? Historically, round 2 was larger with an even percentage acceptance rate, so the odds were a little bit worse, but I feel like that's shifted a lot, and round 1 is now bigger, so I don't think you can tell. Apply when you have the strongest application. Can you give examples of strong extracurriculars you'd want to highlight? I would say leadership is better than participation. So going to events is not as good as organizing an event. Changing the way an organization does something, creating something that doesn't exist, or just simply having an impact. Those are all, most importantly, having an impact. Those are all strong extracurriculars. Oh, the slide about our prices study, was that the one you wanted? This is just the one-day boot camp. This is the slide I think you were talking about. This is 1 day, 9 hours, 7 hours online, 2 hours and a half, 2 hours recorded, a half hour live with a consultant. These are boot camps. 2 of them are sold out, but there's 1 coming up. It costs less than 3 hours of individual time. It's a really, really good deal. I think that's the only slide I have that has prices on it. Okay, I'm a part-time artist. Do you think addressing such things in the essay could weaken my cause rather than strengthening it? No, no. It's not weak at all. It's diverse. It shows another side of you. I think it's great. They're trying to get to know you. Why would you hide something that's important to you? If you're an artist on the side and you make time for it, then that's a priority for you, and they should know that. I don't think it weakens your application at all. Is the angle for them to get insight into community service type activities more focused on hobbies? It's about you. The angle is about you and how you've made an impact and how you've led. It's not there's no tricks here. They're not trying to say, oh, this person had 3 community service projects and 3 hobbies. That's 2 even. We really wanted to see 4 and 2. Oh, this person had 5 and 1. They're even better. There's nothing like that. If your hobby takes up 20 hours a week, that's a bigger deal than any community service project I've ever done. Right? Like it's about you, and so you want to show them what you have really done, not what you think they want you to feel, because you can't fit into a little box here. When bringing back older examples, is creating the struggle of your first business enough to write about, or should we stick with something more recent? Well, again, it's about what you've learned from it, right? So if your first business was a struggle, but today you run a successful business that benefits from the lessons of that first one, then sure, mention the older one. But if you haven't done anything with it since then and you gave up being an entrepreneur and you haven't really learned anything, then it's just an old story that doesn't have a lot of relevance. Do people applying in round 2 have higher GMATs? I have not seen that. For the challenge question, can it be fighting a general social bias in the workplace? Yeah, definitely. Again, you want to be careful about your language because you don't know the bias of the reader, although they tend to be pretty open-minded and not judgmental about anything. But I would not, I wouldn't express things in a really negative way about the other side. One tactic I've suggested is, if people want to write about political causes, find someone from the other side from you and have them read your essay and see if it's offensive or if they think you're being even-handed about it. It's a really good strategy to make sure that you're expressing what's important to you but without denigrating someone else. Does it make sense to retake the GMAT if I have an average GMAT and I'm applying in round 2? I'm assuming by average you mean average for that school. If you think you can do better without affecting your applications, then why not? But if it's going to take away from either your applications or your community service or doing a project at work and it's already at the school's average, I just can't see why it would be a huge benefit. Okay? I mentioned how you should highlight entrepreneurship. Do we put that in a different section of the resume? So I didn't say you should. I said if you have entrepreneurship and want to highlight it, one way to do that is through adding an entrepreneurship section in the resume. So that would be where it could be done. I wouldn't do it if it's just like you started a house painting business in high school, right, or in college. But if it's like a robust section with a couple of examples or one really solid recent example, then I would do it that way. If it's something you just spend a couple hours a week at, then probably not in its own separate section. If I switch jobs after applying, is that perceived as negative, not knowing what someone is doing? Well, they don't know unless you tell them, right? So if you apply and then switch, I would probably tell them at the point of the interview. But if you, or I would just send them a note after the interview and say, look, I switched, but the decision will probably be underway already. I don't think it's going to be, it probably won't factor into the decision in any way. Should promotions be pointed out on the resume? Yes. Why would you hide a strength, Alex? Promotion shows that you've had increased responsibility, and it's a strength. So don't bury it. You want to take full credit for the strengths that you've achieved, and promotions is one of them. Can you use a CV format instead of a resume? Should be 1 page. No more. They really don't want more than a 1-page resume. Okay, and they want it to be very accomplishments focused. Undergraduate jobs and internships, I'm only asking as my work experience determined my transitions into advertising after I graduated. Yeah, I would. If you want to highlight that, I would probably include it under college, like just like an internships bullet point. But yeah, I would include that. What advantages do you think there are in applying round 1 versus round 2? Please don't apply in round 3. I had a client last year who applied to 3 schools in round 1 and then dragged his feet and finally decided, when he didn't get in, to apply to the last 3 in round 3, and he got 3 wait lists. And it's killing him because he saw with 3 wait lists in round 3 that if he had actually applied in round 2, he would have gotten in. And instead, he actually eventually got into one of them, although one kept him waiting until orientation. They waited to see if everyone showed up. He was the last one on the wait list, and then he didn't get in. So he's now sitting there saying, I actually applied in round 3 to a school based on the deadline, not based on whether I wanted to go, and I could have gotten into a dream school if I hadn't been so stubborn about the top 3 that I applied to. So round 3 is just going to be a lot harder. I am scrolling very quickly. I'm from India. That's going to affect my chances. Basically, as a place of origin, I'm reading from the bottom up very quickly. You can't control where you're from. So go to our blog and read the blog post called Overrepresenting Your Overrepresentation, and think about that. But you can't control it. So again, just think about differentiating yourself in terms of other characteristics. But you can't change where you're from. Is the number of seats for marketing the same as the number of seats for other specializations? They're looking to build a diverse class. I don't think they have quotas. Marketing, they tend to get more marketing people, so they tend to take more marketing people. But if they see someone spectacular in another field, they're going to take them. The score 760 gives an edge to compensate for low work experience. There's a blog post also, that says it's something that you just Google, just search on our website for 780. It was an interview I read from an admissions director at Ross who said, I love rejecting clients with a 780 because they coast on the rest of their application. Don't coast. If your GMAT is above the average, you still have to really focus on the others. It won't necessarily make up for work experience. It's just one positive. It's a positive in your column. If they don't think your work experience is robust enough, they may or may not be willing to take a chance on you, but your GMAT will be really solid. So it's not like there's like a trade-off of one for the other. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In India, some of the top Fortune 500 companies only hire employees with analyst description. Does it affect the chances of getting into a good school? No. They understand how the companies work. They're really looking to see what you accomplished, not what your title was. How is an MS in finance different from an MBA with a specialization in finance? Usually because of all the other courses that you take in management and communication and ethics and leadership. The finance may be similar, but the other stuff is more encompassing. It's a Master's of Business Administration with a concentration in finance, right? So there's that business administration piece. Low GPA in undergrad, but my master's is 3.5. Should I really only talk about my master's? No, I would write the optional essay. We have some samples on the website, on the blog, but essentially you want to say, you address the reasons for your low GPA, and then pivot to find out your strengths. Talk about how you made up for that with your GMAT, and hopefully with your GMAT and with your master's. You want them, you want to use that as an opportunity to prove to them that the undergrad is not representative. Do I need to highlight the pedigree? I work at a startup where it's founded by renowned business leaders. Do I need to highlight the pedigree? I wouldn't highlight it. I'd mention it. Mention it if that's a key part of the selling point. But startups can be great even at that level because there's so much scope for you to take on more and more responsibility. So yeah, I'd make it sure that they know who the owners are, but I wouldn't like beat it over the head. You're not name dropping. You're just making sure they understand who the company was started by. If you come from a traditional background, should you showcase attributes about you that others wouldn't expect given your profile? For example, would it be beneficial to highlight creativity if I work in banking? Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to showcase another side of you. Yeah. And Dia Leopold from HBS, actually, I just read a quote from her which said, if you're in banking and finance, we're actually more interested in your verbal GMAT score because we know you're good with numbers. So they really are looking to offset that. I created my first business in college and didn't enter the workforce until after graduation. It looks like an employment gap, but it's not. Do I need to explain it? Not a gap, that we'll figure it out. They'll probably figure it out, but why not just tell them and say the optional essay and indicate it. I think they'll figure out the dates. That shouldn't be a concern. How do you phrase your response in the optional essay to describe why your current manager isn't writing your letter? Oh, it's very easy. Just say, if my current manager knew about my application, it would affect my career. Therefore, I asked so-and-so instead. My current manager has always rated me in the top 10% of employees. Something like that that's positive, but they understand that. Is Kellogg reapplicant friendly? Yes. But they want to understand what you've done that's different. Is speaking about the challenges of being in an interracial relationship considered too personal? Ooh, good question. No, I don't think it is. I think the examples might be, but I think if you talk about what it was like in, sort of in social settings and things, I think it can be not too personal, depending on how it's handled. Will 700 GMAT score be taken only once, be negative, given that there was no retake? Honestly, I just recently took it and don't feel confident I could improve significantly. No, their average is a 715, so you're slightly below that, and 50% of the class is going to be below that. I would look at your breakdown. That's probably more important to them. But if you don't think you can pull it up higher, then just take the 700 and focus on the rest of your application. Do you feel we should diversify the experiences we talk about across essays? I mentioned I wrote all my essays on one topic. No. I meant that for every school I wrote one essay on this topic, on my health issue. No, I did not say that. No, you definitely want to diversify. Definitely. That's why we go through that whole inventory. You want to keep the admissions. I'm so glad I saw that question. Keep the admissions committee learning about you with every essay. Guys, I have to go. Thank you so much for such great questions and being such a great group. And I'll be on the chat board later. Okay, any of the questions I didn't get to, please post them there and I will find them. All right, so beat the GMAT, I'm logging off, and thank you all very much for your time.